mission of the disciples to heal, it seems a bit of an interruption now, where we get the story of the death of John the Baptist. King Herod heard of it, the mission, for Jesus' name had become known. Some were saying, John the Baptizer has been raised from the dead. For this reason, these powers are at work in him. Others said, it is Elijah. Others said, it is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. When Herod heard of it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. For Herod himself had sent men who arrested John, bound him, put him in prison, on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because Herod had married her. John had been telling Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. Herodias had a grudge against John and wanted to kill him, but she could not. Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man. Herod protected him. When Herod heard John, he was greatly perplexed, yet he liked to listen to him. But an opportunity came. When Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his courtiers, officers, and for the leaders of Galilee, when his daughter Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, ask me for whatever you wish, and I will give it. And he solemnly swore to her, whatever you ask me, I will give you, even half my kingdom. She went out and said to her mother, what should I ask for? She replied, the head of John the Baptizer. Immediately she rushed back to the king and requested, I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. The king was deeply grieved, yet out of regard for his oaths and for the guests, he did not wish to refuse her. Immediately the king sent a soldier of the guard with orders to bring John's head. He went and beheaded John in the prison and brought his head on a platter and gave it to the girl. Then the girl gave it to her mother. When his disciples heard about it, they came and took John's body and they laid it in a tomb. Our readings revolve in part at least on the notion of what is holy, what is unholy, what is sacred, what is profane. Over the years, we have lost more and more of the ancient idea of the holy, especially the idea of the holy having real and potent danger about it, something too sacred to be touched or even grasped. We get a clear example of it where Uzzah tries to stop the ark of the presence of God from falling to the ground, and he's struck down for touching the untouchable, that too sacred to be touched. The holy still might have an element of danger to it, of specialness, of being set apart. There's a hint of holy dynamite, but over the years it contracts further and further, left to the margin of the idea. Does anyone, Annie Dillard is a nature writer primarily, but one infused with an ancient idea of the holy. Annie Dillard on worship. Does anyone have the foggiest idea what sort of power we so blithely invoke? Or, as I suspect, does no one believe a word of it? The churches are like children playing on the floor with chemistry sets, mixing up a batch of TNT to kill a Sunday morning. It is madness to wear straw hats, velvet hats, and proper clothing to church. We should all be wearing crash helmets. Ushers should be here issuing life preservers and signal flares. They should lash us to the pews. For the sleeping God may wake someday and take offense. For the waking God may draw us out to where we may never return. In the story of John the Baptist, we hear that John is a holy man. Is that ethics? Is it his very person? Or purely he is a person of God, therefore holy? And he finds himself in a most unholy and profane situation. There in prison, there to be killed. But even there in prison, John makes his prison cell a sanctuary by speaking even there. And even unholy Herod Antipas listens and is fascinated, even as he is utterly perplexed by him. One of the common tropes in our time is that as the holy has constricted, we give more and more power to the unholy. Perhaps best seen in horror movies in Hollywood. Another connected trope to this is many Christians hold to the idea that the world is going to get worse and worse until we force God's hand to intervene. And that will change the world. Anybody who cracks open a Bible knows that's nonsense. And here is a great example. What were Herod and Herodias like? I'll try to be somewhat brief here. Herod wasn't even a king. He was called by the Romans a tetrarch. He had this little slice of the territory of Galilee, and then it went across the Jordan down to the Dead Sea. He had a fourth of a region, hence a tetrarch. Herod was the son of so-called Herod the Great. Few people could be as evil as his father, and surely he carried a bit of guilt of being one of the few surviving sons of his father. Over the years, he nagged the emperors about becoming more than a mere tetrarch. He wanted to be king of a region. By the time Caligula, himself a lunatic, became emperor of Rome, his nagging got to the point that Caligula could not stand it anymore, and he exiled Herod off to an area near Lyon, France. We don't hear anything else of Herod or his wife once they're deposited in France. It's been said that the only moral act Herodias, his wife, ever made was a decision to go with Herod to France because Caligula offered her as a princess of a neighboring kingdom. The conjugal activities of Herod and his wife are notorious. Herod was already married in an alliance marriage. He met his niece, who was also his brother's wife, and fell in love. She was married, but her husband never divorced her. So her life with Herod Antipas was a bigamous relationship. Her child with her original husband is the dancing girl we hear of in the text. and I want to be very careful here. All of us, as soon as we hear of Josephus' name for her, Salome, we think of the dance of the seven veils. And with every Jesus movie, make sure that they have Salome's seductive dance before her lascivious stepfather. It probably gets worse. The text makes sure that we know Salome, Herodias, is a little girl. So you have two possibilities. Her father-in-law is an utter perv, or here at his birthday party, he's showing off and being overly generous to the little girl dancing. Just like we're over generous in our praise whenever a child performs at our own family gatherings. We hear nothing at Herod's birthday banquet of the activities of the guests. We hear only of Herod's vow, as thoughtless and maybe as ruthless as that of Jephthah long before, who sacrificed his daughter. None of the guests apparently say a word to save the life of the Baptist. It's possible they're all too drunk to save anyone. But the drive shafts of corrupted politics and morals torqued this birthday party. Everywhere there was greed and whispers as people plotted to become more powerful, to try to become the first of people in Galilee. In that unholy gathering, the Holy One, John, is in a dungeon. This is just a girl, not the siren of our imaginations. Just a girl. And she asks for murder as her reward. She's offered half the kingdom, but she asks only for blood. She is indeed her mother's daughter. Herod didn't know what to make of John, and now he's perplexed again what to do in the birthday party. And he feels caught by his own braggadocio, his own vow perhaps. But instead of it offering life, it offers death. I never noticed before that this story, and I don't know if I've ever talked about this story before, that Herod begins the account wondering if Jesus is the resurrected John the Baptist. There was a deep and abiding connection between the Baptist and Jesus. John baptized Jesus. And now Jesus succeeds him. There's wonderful bits here for us to consider. John's disciples are brave enough to bury John the Baptist. I don't know if the head gets buried with him or not. Jesus' disciples flee at the sign of danger. And only a few women and one man or so, depending on how you read it, will bury Jesus. John, holy John, lies moldering in the grave. Holy Jesus gets resurrected. The people are wondering, is Jesus a sign of a new age? And from Malachi, they believe that Elijah would have to return. And maybe this is Jesus. The world is going to decisively change. The holy is going to enter the world in a whole new way through Jesus. the unholy then be banished? Christianity for 2,000 years has worked with a real struggle. If the holy is too separate from humanity, too separate to be touched, the beyond, the numinous, what do we make of Jesus when the holy is utterly conjoined with the everyday, with the human being? And we've struggled with that all these years. One way we've dealt with the issue of holy, you can hear in that wonderful series of phrases in Ephesians, that the holy loses some of its danger, some of its power, and it becomes less something that creates fear and more that it is in the presence of a God who lavishes us with gifts in Christ. Ephesians says that every one of our experiences when we've been made holy in our baptism, every experience, every thought, every feeling is reframed from our most bracing joys to our cherished achievements, to our besetting temptations, to our anguished regrets, to our wounded losses, contain traces, at least, of the holy. Connections to Christ, connections to God. In Christ, in the everyday, we're joined to the power and presence of God. In Christ, we are knit, body and soul, to each other. In Christ, where we walk, where we talk, where we live, conjoins the holy and the unholy, the sacred and the proclaimed. God chooses all of us to be holy, to carry out the work of God in this world. God pursues all of us with a relentless power. But we've come to see that that relentless power is rarely one that the holy fears from the unholy. That relentless power of God, in the end, is divine love. Put differently, whenever we live and move and act in love, we're in the presence of the holy. We're acting in the name of God. Whenever we look deep within, whenever we look at others, we walk on holy ground. We walk with people who have been touched by God. Shine with the light of God. In 2015, how do we regard ourselves as holy? How do we regard others as holy? Bearing the very presence of God, or as Paul says, the temple of the Spirit.